Our podcast reviews well-known movies and contains spoilers. The podcast may contain mature subject matter and mature language. Listener discretion is advised. Enjoy the show.
Quiet on set. Places, everybody. And action.
Welcome, everyone, to the Hooked on Movies podcast. Today, we will be looking at the 1974 Mel Brooks classic comedy, Young Frankenstein. With me are Ken.
Put the candle back.
And Ted.
My grandfather's work was doo-doo! I am not interested in death. The only thing that concerns me is the preservation of life.
And I'm Eric. Life! Life! Do you hear me? Give my creation life! And that's the theme of Young Frankenstein. Life. I think we've pretty much all said that. Ted, give us the details of this great movie.
Okay, so Young Frankenstein was directed by Mel Brooks. It was a screenplay by Gene Wilder and Mel Brooks. It's based off of the novel Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. It has a running time of 105 minutes. A release date of December 15th, 1974. It had a budget of $2.78 million and a box office gross of $86.2 million. Young Frankenstein stars Gene Wilder as Dr. Frederick Frankenstein, Peter Boyle as the monster, Marty Feldman as Igor, Cloris Leachman as Frau Blucher, Terry Garr as Inga, Kenneth Mars as Inspector Kemp, Madeline Kahn as Elizabeth, Richard Hayden as Herr Gerhard Falkstein, Richard Roth as Inspector Kemp's aide, Monty Landis and Rusty Blitz as gravediggers, Gene Hackman as Harold the blind man, and Mel Brooks, voice only, as the werewolf, the cat hit by the dart, and Victor Frankenstein.
You give the gravediggers credit lines?
Hey, yeah.
Okay.
Everybody's got to... got to give the shout out to somebody.
Hey, man. If it works, let's go with it.
What did the
critics
Some of
think
us have to
one?
be ditch diggers.
The world needs ditch diggers too, right? From Caddyshack.
So the critics for Young Frankenstein on Rotten Tomatoes is a certified fresh of 94%. It has an audience score of 92%, so pretty much right in line with each other. Finding negative reviews was kind of hard. I did find one. A John Doerr of The Hollywood Reporter said, "It is good-natured, lowbrow, backlot, hit-or-miss humor, but with no cumulative effect beyond its succession of hard-worked jokes." Positive critics, Vincent Canby of the New York Times, "Some of the gags don't work, but fewer than in any previous Brooks film that I've seen. And when the jokes are meant to be bad, they are riotously poor. What more can one ask of Mel Brooks?" And Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times said, "Mel Brooks is home with Young Frankenstein, his most disciplined and visually inventive film. It also happens to be very funny. Young Frankenstein is as funny as we expect a Mel Brooks comedy to be, but it is more than that. It shows artistic growth and a more sure-handed control of the material by a director who once seemed willingly to do literally anything for a laugh. It is more confident and less breathless."
Hard to argue with that.
I'm happy that old Roger liked this movie.
So do you boys remember the first time you saw this movie?
I don't. It's one of those movies that's always been there. My dad loved horror movies. This is one of those movies that is so funny. It was on TV, and so we would watch it, and it's hilarious. It's always been hilarious. So it's kind of fuzzy. It's the first time I saw it. I've always known that it's funny.
Ken, cable for you, right?
Yeah, cable.
Most likely cable, yeah. I mean, I'm in the same boat as Ted. I don't remember a time when it wasn't there. I know I saw this actually before the original Frankenstein. What I remember most about seeing this movie as a kid, my mom laughing at Madeline Kahn when she says poopy undies at the end of the film. It just cracked her up so much that for me, it's always been a fun line in the movie.
This movie is one of those movies that really the whole family can watch. I believe it's a PG rating. So it's one of those movies that you can really show on kind of a network television or cable without a lot being removed from it, which is kind of nice. It's got some of those one-liners and gags that I think the whole family really enjoys. For me, I saw this thing in high school, and kind of like you, Ted, after high school, I've probably seen it 100 times. It's always there. It's always in the quoting lines from it. You're quoting stuff from it. But probably high school, freshman year for high school for me. And hopefully the people out there listening have seen this movie, but just in case you haven't, Ken is going to tell us the plot.
Dr. Frederick Frankenstein is a lecturing physician at an American medical school and is engaged to a socialite named Elizabeth. He gets frustrated when anyone brings up the subject of his grandfather, Victor Frankenstein, infamous mad scientist, with whom he does not want to be associated with, and insists that his surname be pronounced Frankenstein. He's informed that he has inherited his family's estate in Transylvania. At the Transylvania station, he is met by a hunchbacked, bug-eyed servant named Igor and a beautiful young female assistant named Inga. Arriving at the estate, Frederick meets the caretaker, Frau Blücher. After discovering the secret entrance to his grandfather's laboratory and reading his private journals, Frederick decides to resume his grandfather's experiments in reanimating the dead. He and Igor steal the corpse of a recently executed criminal, and Frederick sets to work experimenting on a large corpse. He sends Igor to steal the brain of a deceased scientist and saint, but is startled by his own reflection and drops the brain. Igor instead takes a brain labeled abnormal and returns with it, and Frederick transplants it into the corpse. Frederick brings the creature back to life by an electrical charge during a lightning storm. The creature takes his first steps, but is frightened by Igor lighting a match. The monster attacks Frederick and nearly strangles him before he is sedated. Meanwhile, unaware of the creature's existence, the townspeople gather to discuss the unease at Frederick's continuing his grandfather's work. Inspector Kempt, a one-eyed police official with a prosthetic arm, whose German accent is so thick that even his own countrymen can't understand him, proposes to visit the doctor, whereupon he demands assurance that Frankenstein will not create another monster. Returning to the lab, Frederick discovers Blücher setting the creature free. She reveals the monster and the family's love of violin music and her own romantic relationship with Frederick's grandfather. The creature is enraged by sparks from a thrown switch and escapes the castle. While roaming the countryside, the monster has encountered a young girl and a blind hermit. These are references to the 1931's Frankenstein and the 1935's Bride of Frankenstein. Frederick recaptures the monster and locks himself in a room with him. He calms the monster's homicidal tendencies with a flattery and a promise to guide him to success, embracing his heritage as a Frankenstein. At a theater full of scientists, Frederick shows the creature, following simple commands. The demonstration continues with Frederick and the monster, both in top hats and tuxedos, performing the musical number, A stage light suddenly explodes and frightens the monster, interrupting the performance. The crowd begins to boo and throw vegetables. Where they got the vegetables, who knows? Throwing it at the monster, who becomes enraged and charges into the crowd, where he is captured and chained by police. Back in the laboratory, Inga comforts Frederick, and they have sex on the suspended table. The monster escapes from prison the same night that Frederick's fiancée Elizabeth arrives unexpectedly for a visit. The monster takes her captive as he flees. Elizabeth falls in love with the creature due to his enormous Schwanstecker.
He's going to be very popular.
While the townspeople hunt for the monster, Frederick plays the violin to lure the creature back to the castle and recaptures him. Just as the mob storms the laboratory, Frankenstein transfers some of his intellect into the creature, who reasons with the mob. Elizabeth, with her hair styled back like the Bride of Frankenstein, marries the now sophisticated monster, while Inga, in bed with Frederick, asks her new husband what he got in return during the transfer procedure. Frederick growls wordlessly and braces Inga, as Elizabeth did when abducted by the monster, and sings the song, All Sweet Mystery of Life. The end.
Okay, let's kick it off here with talking about the start of this movie. It obviously starts off with Baron von Frankenstein in the casket with the last will and testament. And then we meet Dr. Frankenstein, who is a well-known scientist and apparently a very good physician who can handle stuff with humps. Teaching his class with some very annoying people in there. I love the introduction of this where that one annoying student is just browbeating him about his grandfather and his past. I just love how he just kind of defends himself as not being the mistakes of his grandfather and his name.
He seems to be kind of like a showman even at the beginning of the film, because we see him later on doing the pudding on the Ritz, but he brings the subject to do that experiment, and he does it like a magician. He's like, here's this gentleman who I've never seen before.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so
Total magician-like.
Right off the bat, he doesn't seem to be a very nice doctor. I mean, the guy ended up kicking him in the nuts.
Well, he had to prove a point.
And then he gives him an extra $1. Now, granted, that
Give him an
dollar
extra
might be a little bit more like $5 in our day and age, I guess, but it's still kind of rude.
He's supposed to come off as a talented surgeon and doctor. Is he just kind of faking it? Is that why that guy's in on the gag, right?
Wait. What are you talking about? The old man?
Yeah, Dr. Frankenstein.
No, that's not a gag.
That guy's not paid?
No,
or he's being paid, obviously.
He's being paid for his services of being a human guinea pig.
But he's not. So he's not part of the.
No, it's not a gag. Okay. He's showing involuntary and voluntary action. So when he goes to knee him in the groin, the guy makes a sudden move, to block it. That's a voluntary action. But the involuntary action is when he puts the clamp on the back of his neck and kind of freezes it, and that's when he knees him.
Yeah,
and he can't defend himself. No,
that's why I was wondering if it was just a sleight of hand.
No, not at all.
Trick.
Not at all.
Look at his face when he first pretends he's going to knee him in the groin.
Yeah.
He looks at him like, what the heck are you trying to do here? He has no clue that this was
He's like, this wasn't part of the offer.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, okay.
It's kind of like in the beginning of Ghostbusters, when they're predicting the little things behind the cards. And they're paying keep your $20.
If Bill Murray is rigging that particular experiment.
This is a complete legitimate scientific experiment, at least for movie means it is, yes.
Okay.
And the deleted scenes, they talk about him as being in the top 5 in his field.
Okay.
Oh.
So he's legit.
I guess one of my favorite parts of the first part here is when he accidentally stabs himself with the scalpel. I guess that was not planned. That was a complete accident, but it's still pretty funny.
No, I think that was planned, because if you look it's heavily padded, though, that leg.
They said it was a mistake.
I don't know how it could be a mistake. I mean,
so he really stabbed himself with a scalpel?
I'm assuming that the scalpel wasn't like a full scalpel. It was.
I never saw that in anything. I just noticed that if you look at the scene, you could tell his right leg is more padded than his left leg. It's heavily padded. At least that's how I
assumed it was like a spring-activated scalpel or something.
Possibly, yeah. That's pretty funny, though. I like that. I have this whole thing in my mind. The kid that stands up to ask all the questions about his grandfather.
Dr. Frankenstein.
I think he was the student that pulled the short straw. And that's why all those people were in his class, is to talk to him about his grandfather. I mean, it's kind of like Indiana Jones. The girls were in his class because they thought he was cute, but all the guys are in there because they think he's cool.
Like I said earlier, it's kind of like a performance. I mean, it's almost similar to when he goes on stage with the monster later on. It's almost a comic routine. He's making jokes and he's making everybody laugh. He gets off of people liking him when he's presenting something. And then when he's challenged like he was, he loses his shit. He gets a little upset.
If your relative was somebody that notorious and you're a professor like that, wouldn't at the beginning of the first class, wouldn't you say like, all right, we're going to take one class period and you all can ask me one question. We'll do this and then we're not going to talk about it the rest of the class. I mean,
could have been a new student too. You never know.
I like to think that he drew the short straw for the rest of the class so that everybody else didn't have to ask him, but they all wanted to.
Like whenever you go to a teacher, you hear rumblings about that teacher, and a lot of people are probably told don't talk to him about his past. So I think nobody else probably wanted to do that, but he didn't care. There's a deleted scene after this I wish they would have kept. He walks with the guy that brings the will to him, and they discuss about him going back to Transylvania. Why is it Transylvania? I don't know why, because that's not where they originally lived in the first place.
That was my next question.
The deleted scene, actually, they're walking past this violinist who starts playing that song that's played throughout the movie, And all of a sudden he changes his mind and decides he wants to go to Transylvania. But then he goes up to the guy with the violin and he says, "Oh, this is a nice instrument." And he breaks it in two over his knee. And then the guy goes, "Why did you do that to that guy's violin?" He's like, "I didn't do that. Why would I do that?" Like, he totally forgot. And I wish they would have kept that in there, because I think it points to other things later on in the movie.
I have a feeling that it's Transylvania just so that they can make the joke when he asks the shoeshine boy, "Is this a Transylvania station?" Because that's a play off of the Chattanooga Choo Choo. I have a feeling that's the only reason why it's Transylvania, because Transylvania, of course, is Dracula. It's not Frankenstein. Frankenstein is more of a German, Bavarian. That's where it was originally set in Mary Shelley's book.
It's kind of funny that Mel Brooks said in the commentary that all the townspeople had English accents on purpose, which I thought was funny.
There's that part, and then Inga has a German accent.
Of course.
But yet they're in Transylvania.
Yeah.
Slovakia is not too far away from Germany, but it's all kind of funny. The English-speaking townspeople and then Inga make me think that Transylvania is only there for that Chattanooga choo-choo joke.
Frau Blucher.
Oh, yeah.
She also has a German.
Frau is Mrs. in German. That's pretty funny, too. Cloris Leachman was nominated for Best Supporting Actress for the Golden Globes for this role. I don't know. She's not really in it a whole lot. She's funny in what she does, of course. I think Terry Garr probably deserved that more. Now, Madeline Kahn was also nominated for Best Actress for the Golden Globes. That's again there too. She's not in the movie enough. She should have been nominated for Best Supporting Actress, if that's the way we're going. Terry Garr is more of a Best Actress, even though she's in a supporting role. They're all really supporting roles, if you really want to get technical about the whole thing.
I think all three of them, though, bring the right amount of energy to that particular part. In fact, Madeline Kahn was originally supposed to play Inga.
You're right.
And she's like, "No, I'd rather play Elizabeth," because I think she knew that she could play it the way it needed to be played. And that's what I love about Madeline Kahn, is she knows what works best for her. But I agree with you with Terry Garr as far as, I mean, her performance is great. I mean, first of all, beautiful woman, especially here in 1974. I mean, she's gorgeous.
What knockers?
What knockers?
Yes.
Well, thank you, Doctor. She's got the accent down really well. It's a great accent.
It's a comedic accent.
It's a comedic accent. What she did was
it's really
she
good.
used her hairstylist.
Cher's hairstylist.
Cher's hairstylist when she was on the Cher's show, and she imitated that. I like it. I think it's a great comedic
Oh, it is.
accent.
It's great.
Especially when the candle.
Comedic.
Put these candle back. Her comedic timing is excellent in this movie, too.
She's excellent.
I would disagree with Cloris Leachman, especially with supporting actress roles. Time frame isn't what matters. It's what you use with the time. And whenever she's in the picture, especially at the beginning, when she introduces herself and tells them about going up the staircase. One of my favorite lines in the whole movie, she's like, "Just stay close to the candles. The staircase can be treacherous," and she has the candles not lit. It's just a great line, and they're just looking at her. The facial responses that everybody has when they deliver these lines are priceless. This is what my favorite things about this movie is everybody at one time plays the straight man, and the other one plays the comic relief. So it doesn't stay with the same person over and over again. They trade. So sometimes Marty Feldman will play the straight guy, and sometimes Gene Wilder will. They'll be the serious actor all of a sudden, and allow the other person to be the silly one. When you talk ensemble cast, this is an ensemble cast because each one of them is giving each other a time to shine.
I don't think they were giving out the SAG Awards at this time, but I know that the SAG Awards gives out an ensemble cast award. This would have definitely encapsulated that. And like we even said with Blazing Saddles in our last episode, two amazing ensemble casts that everything falls correct. One of the things that I really enjoy here is you do have to pay attention. There are some in-your-face jokes, kind of like what the one critic was saying, but a lot of the jokes, like what you said, Ken, they're subtle because they're facial movements. And Marty Feldman looking at this audience to make sure that we're in on the joke as well. But yeah, a lot of the reaction shots are what makes this funny because, like you said, they all can be the straight and funny person at different times, so you really do kind of have to pay attention as to what is going on here.
I love the train station when we first meet Igor, or when he's like, "I thought it was Igor." No, it's Igor.
Well, doesn't he do that because he changed his name to Frankenstein?
Yeah,
Exactly.
Well, they were
Okay,
wrong.
that's
weren't
what I
they?
thought.
They're
Yeah.
wrong, weren't they? But and then of course the hump, and he's like, "What hump?" As soon
The
as we
hump is
meet
the
him-
best. Is the best joke in the.
Yeah, it's a great joke. Unfortunately,
It's hilarious.
Mel Brooks uses it over and over again in other
Yes,
films,
of
like
course
Robin
he
Hood
does.
Men in Tights. But in this movie, it's great because when we talk about facial expressions, right off the bat, we're introduced to Igor, and it's a freeze frame just to kind of get a look of him and to see how odd looking this guy is. And then it's just the back and forth between him and Gene Wilder. What I like about it, it's just original. I heard a rumor that when he tells Gene Wilder to walk this way and they go down the stairs with the little stick, that Aerosmith was watching this movie and that's where they got the title from the song. I don't know if
There's
that's
one of-
true.
There's
That's
one of
what I
those
heard.
things that I've read the same thing.
Okay, well, let's see. That was Toys in the Attic album, which is 75, so it's right around that
It's
time
conceivable.
frame. It is conceivable.
It is conceivable. I just don't know how much I believe.
I don't know how much I
that.
believe in that either, but it was out there and I thought it was just an interesting fact that it was true.
Mel Brooks can find a yarn there.
He does. He likes
Yeah.
to spin yarns about things. So, but I did read that too. Marty Feldman's hilarious. It's the eyes that
It is.
I don't know if he pops them out like that or if that's just how he normally was.
That he had a disease where instead of being cross-eyed, his eyes went peripheral. So
Okay.
they were saying that if you wanted to avoid Marty Feldman, you just stand in front of him,
Yeah.
right in the middle. But he had
Wow.
great peripheral vision. And unfortunately, he died just way too young.
Yeah.
48 years old, and the man just smoked like a chimney and just
6 packs a day or something
oh
like
my
that.
goodness!
He was-
he just
His
health-wise,
comedic
he
timing.
was, comedic
his
timing,
comedic
and he's a
timing
great
is
British
amazing.
actor.
And it's not just the eyes, it's his delivery is really great. He's so good at just saying the right things and doing the right thing. Even the outtakes, Gene Wilder couldn't stop laughing, especially later on in the scene when his girlfriend shows up and he bites her scarf.
Stole the fox.
Yeah.
The whole cast broke. Like even the production people
Right.
started laughing because he kept coming back after he did that. He would come back with pieces of fur in his mouth, and
Let's be honest. Marty Feldman should have been nominated for Best Supporting
Yeah,
Actor. He was
there you
incredible in
go.
this movie. That's a crime
it's
right there.
one of the last things that he was credited for. He did a project with the Pythons. When you're included with those guys, I mean, it's the creme de la creme of British humor.
Saw him in a few movies after this. The last movie I think I saw him in was in a movie called In God We Trust.
He died
1980.
while filming Blackbeard.
Yeah.
in 82.
That was
Yeah.
actually the last movie I saw, actually, with him.
Yeah.
But he introduces her to Inga because he throws the luggage. You want to roll in the hay.
Roll
And they both look,
he's fun.
and they both look at each other. It's-
Right.
Yeah.
That's
It's
one of those
fun.
things you have to watch because you're thinking what you're thinking, and then they look at each other and they go, okay, they're thinking what I'm thinking. I think that's one of the really cool things about the movie. I said it before, but
It's those subtle sexual innuendos.
I love the way that it makes you feel like you're in on the joke. That's one of the ways that the movie really, really hits when they do things like that. They get the pauses and everything just right so that you feel like you're in on it. Just wonderfully paced. That's one of the big things about comedy is pacing. If it goes too fast sometimes, it doesn't hit right, and if you go too slow, because you don't have an applause track, you can't just let things sit. It's just really well timed.
I think this movie is, in some ways, very similar to Blazing Saddles and some things that you just said with the timing and things of that nature. But it's the opposite of the last movie. It was more in-your-face humor. You had all the swear words and all the references using the N-word
Racial
and
reference, the racial references.
things of that nature, where this movie doesn't do any of that, really.
No.
It uses a different type of humor, but uses the same type of timing, the same
Right.
type of pacing. And I think that is a testament to Mel Brooks knowing how to do two different type of movies. Because you could get caught up in saying, you know what, I just saw this type of movie with your Blazing Saddle, but this is completely different. And I think maybe it's that way because of the fact that the original story comes from Gene Wilder, because this was Gene Wilder's idea originally. It was kind of just like a 4-page sketch, and depending on who you ask is how this movie again, Mel Brooks says that they talked about it over lunch when doing Blazing Saddles. You hear other people say that Gene Wilder wouldn't do Blazing Saddles unless Mel Brooks did Young Frankenstein. So
I've heard that. Yep.
I read that too, but didn't we find out though in Blazing Saddles that Gene Wilder wasn't supposed to be in Blazing Saddles? models.
Right.
He was brought in at the beginning of production because the guy who was supposed to play the Waco Kid was drunk and couldn't perform because he was throwing up green stuff. I have a hard time with that particular narrative that he wouldn't do it. They both seem to like to spin a little bit of a yarn when it came to talking about how things came to be.
Well, the producer said that it was Gene Wilder's agent who actually represented Gene Wilder and Peter Boyle and Marty Feldman at that time. And he talked to Gene Wilder and said, I think you should do a movie with these guys. He goes, oh, that sounds great. Why do you think I should do that? Well, I represent all three of you. And then Gene Wilder says, well, I got this thing called Young Frankenstein that I would like to do. And then they presented it to the studios and they said, well, we'll do it if you can get Mel Brooks on.
That sounds more logical.
A little bit.
However it came to be, it's an amazing homage. I'm glad that they went that way with this particular movie. And I know Mel Brooks had to do some chicanery to make sure that it was done in black and white, which I am eternally grateful that they did it in black and white.
It is just an incredible look and so rare for that era.
Because it has the feel. That's the other thing that this movie has is it always has the feel of a Universal horror movie. That adds a level of authenticity that makes the subtle things funnier. Even to they do the credits before the first scene, before they do the Baron von Frankenstein casket scene. And you get all the credits just like a Universal horror movie. And one of the underrated things in this movie is the score. To start the movie off, you start with that wonderful feeling of, oh, this is an old-time Universal horror movie. I'm watching Bride of Frankenstein or Dracula or Wolfman. I love how they do that.
It reminds me of what we just did, Blazing Saddles, at the beginning with that song. You think you're watching a real Western. We don't know that we're really going into a comedy here, but we know with Mel Brooks we're doing a comedy. But
exactly.
If you didn't know Mel Brooks was the director here, you would think, oh, this is going to be another monster movie. And you're right. I think the score here is perfect. I think it sets everything up perfectly throughout the whole movie, and that's just a testament to the composer. Now, when we see Cloris Leachman, she's perfect as this lady who had an affair with his grandfather. I love the scene when they're upstairs getting ready to go to bed. She keeps on asking him if he would like, brandy or milk and Ovaltine, which that's an old joke. After a while, people are not going to know what that is.
But she ad-libbed that.
But they actually ad-libbed a lot of that. But Cloris Leachman said about Gene Wilder, what she loved about him was during that scene when he would lean to his side like he was leaving and she was leaning to her side like she was leaving. When she pulled back, he would pull back. And she loved that about him, that he knew how to do that with her. It was kind of organic in that type of way. That's why it works so well. That scene, it could be coming off really cheesy, but it comes off really well because of their interaction with each other. And then, of course, when he says nothing, she closes her eyes and stuff like that, kind of like almost out of shock. Really enjoy that one.
Cloris Leachman is one of these people, too, that's never aged. She's always looked like she's like 50.
Yeah, from like Rhoda and Mary Tyler Moore.
Exactly.
We just lost her, a couple years ago?
Yeah. And she even looked the same.
When she died, it was like a surprise. But like, wait a second, she's dead?
She's still alive? Right.
Well, she was actually a Miss American pageant. And she also won an Oscar for the Last Picture Show. So she has a lot of street cred coming into here. And then after this movie, like you said, Mary Tyler Moore Show, and then High Anxiety next with Mel Brooks. Yeah, that's a great role that she does there. If you think that she looks mean here and maybe even unattractive, I don't know if you want to say she's unattractive here, but when we get to High Anxiety, she's scary looking. It's a great performance. As the movie goes on, is not as great as, let's say, Terry Garr's or even Madeline Kahn's, because her role is not as important, I think, as it moves on. But I think these first few scenes with her in it, they just knock it out of the park together.
No, I agree 100%. She is really good here. The first thing I remember her from, actually, is crazy enough, was the Facts of Life. When she took over for Mrs. Gilbert.
Yes, that's right.
That's what I first remember her as. And
that's right.
That's why I say she's never aged. She's continually looks the same. But her comedic timing is really good. You can tell she's a seasoned actress. She knows how to move things along. I did read, though, as much as she may have enjoyed working with Gene Wilder in that particular scene that Ken talked about, she was very frustrated with him because he would break all the time. She told, I guess, in an interview, if there was a good take, you knew it was going to be ruined because Gene was going to laugh. And she goes, and guess who never got in trouble for it?
Sure.
Gene.
Right.
Well, when
like,
you're one of the writers, and I mean, you're Gene
Yeah,
Wilder.
He's
Yeah.
like Jimmy Fallon, I guess. He has to laugh at everything.
But that is kind of funny, though, too. He got cracked up so much.
Right after this scene is my favorite scene, probably in the whole movie, with the candle and the bookcase and them removing the candle and that thing just going around. Fun fact about that, Mel Brooks actually cut some frames to make it look like the revolving case would go faster. So he would cut little
makes
frames
sense.
here and there to make it go faster. And of course, the famous line, put the candle back. But then, of course, when he gets nailed up against the wall and he's got his face all flattened there and he's trying to say, whatever you do, don't put the candle back. When I was a kid, it's what kept on bringing me back to the movie over and over again. And then as I got older, it's a different appreciation. That type of humor is fun for somebody who's maybe 8 or 9 years old.
I think it's fun for someone who's 48.
Yeah,
I agree.
It made
Yeah.
me
It's still
chuckle.
fun.
Yeah.
I still say it's my
Makes-
favorite line. So
Makes me chuckle every time I watch it. I did catch myself, though, the last couple of times that I watched it for the podcast, trying to figure out what the pattern was that they had to put the candle in to make it stick one way or the other.
I think if you take it out and then put it back in quickly, like he did at the end when she was on the other side of the wall, then it only rotated halfway.
Takes
But we're
halfway.
We're really
Yeah.
dissecting this one here.
No,
So-
it's just one of those crazy things that my mind tried to figure out. It still makes me laugh. I like where he gets stuck. He's talking to her, and Terry Garr's reaction to it is hilarious as well. All shocked.
And you know what? It's her version of putting the candle back is the reason why I went with that line at the beginning of our podcast, because it's funny how she does it. She has that accent, that fake comedic German accent that we like so much, and it's just very appreciative. If we go after the scene, though, it continues to be funny because then we get Marty Feldman again, and you get the skulls going one by one by one.
The
You got
AGS.
what is it, 3 years and 1 year, and then they show him and he scares them. And I thought it was one of the most funniest bits I ever saw. In fact, when he does that little singing and bump bump, it's kind of paying homage to Mel Brooks, because I didn't know this until we did this movie. But I guess Mel Brooks is a drummer.
Yeah, I didn't know that either.
I guess
I didn't know that.
he's a very good drummer, actually. And a lot of the people that I listened to that talked about this movie and other movies says that his timing is that of a drummer. And I don't know if one plays with the other, because the musical drumming and musical timing is different than comedic timing. But that's how they compared it. It was
interesting.
It was fun to know that Mel Brooks is even more diverse. I didn't think we were going to find out more about Mel Brooks than we already had, because we have the show of shows. We know a lot about Mel Brooks.
Right.
Did not know he was a good drummer.
I didn't know that. That's pretty cool. There is a certain thing with the drumming, though, too. It does kind of make a sense because it is keeping the time and keeping the pace of a song, usually. So I can see where the two could be kind of intertwined a little bit, but it is very interesting.
We've talked about the wonderful supporting cast. You have Terry Garr, you have Madeline Kahn, Marty Feldman, Kenneth Mars as Constable.
The reason he got the role is because he was the only person that agreed to wear a monocle over the eye patch.
No kidding.
Well, that
That's
and he was
awesome.
in the producers. He was.
Well, yes, of course.
He was
he's one of
the Nazi.
Mel Brooks' buddies there, and
He's
of
funny.
course the great Peter Boyle as just a phenomenal monster. The only complaint I had about this, and maybe this is in the Blu-ray version of it, I never noticed it on the VHS or the DVD, but towards the end, you can really tell
Yep.
that it's just a mask covering that he's got on his face there, which I really never noticed in the lower quality
The
video.
lower definition.
I noticed that too when I watched it this time on my Blu-ray player, but I try to make it off as, well, they did have to put a new brain in, so
That's true.
I guess you're going to have that flap over. I'm going to use that as my excuse. I will go and say, as far as Kenneth Mars go, a fun fact, in the deleted scenes, the reason why he had that wooden arm is because the original monster pulled it off, is what they said.
Yes, I did read that as well. That's
I wish they would have
interesting.
kept that in, because later on the monster pulls the arm out again,
Right.
and I wish they
Right.
would have been able to keep both jokes in, because that would have made it, I think, funny.
It always makes me laugh, too, when they use him as a battering ram.
Yeah.
He's speaking this really weird accent that nobody else can really understand. That always makes me laugh, too.
And that's really amazing that he does that, because one of the reasons why I didn't do one of his lines is I couldn't talk like
Yeah,
he
no.
talked
Right.
Because we can understand pretty much what he said, but the way he said it, I think it takes a special kind of genius to be able to talk that way, where it's like so heavy, but you could still understand it, but it's played off as ununderstandable, if that's even a word, ununderstandable.
Unintelligible, either way. It's just so funny.
And then you have the dart scene. Though I had a problem with the dart scene at the end because the car drives away and it has like all these darts all over the place.
Yes.
And you only see like a few that were like a couple that went out the window. But there's like at least 10 of them that are out there on all the tires. And I think it's even on the chauffeur, the guy who's driving the car. It's on his helmet or whatever the case may be. Yeah, but Ken Marsh does a really good job. It's the right people doing the right things at the right time and just the right amount. I think each person has the right amount of screen time. I don't think I've seen a movie, a comedy movie especially, that knew how to play to the strengths of each character and knew when to use them and when not to use them. Mel Brooks is brilliant here in knowing how much time to give Madeline Kahn or Terry Garr or Cloris Leachman, even in Kenneth Mars, and even the leads. You know, outside of Gene Wilder, nobody really dominates the movie. They're just rotated in really nicely. Even at the end, when you have the two hookups, you have Elizabeth and the monster, and you got Inga and Dr. Frankenstein. And then at the end, you have Igor. He's blowing the horn at the end because, you know, we need to see him for the last time, too. It's just a nice combination of screen time for each person. I think it's brilliantly done.
One of the hardest things to do in comedy, from all the stuff that I've watched, is knowing when to pull back. That's one of the things that I think that Mel Brooks does better than anybody else.
Back then.
He knows when to pull back. When something's done enough, and then he brings that person back, and it makes you actually want to see the person more, rather than overdoing it like with a lot of comedies. Modern comedies, that's one of my biggest pet peeves, is the overdoing it. And that's, I think, part of why I think you see somebody like Will Ferrell, some of his movies can be rather inconsistent because it's overdone.
Fortunately, some of Mel's later movies were a little overdone.
Yes. There's a sketch comedy thing, his connection to it worked so well that really helped with that being able to pull somebody back and to not overdo a particular character.
Or a joke. Because
right.
I would say this. The hump thing is the perfect example in this movie, why this movie works the way it does. The hump is only mentioned a few times, but it feels like it's mentioned more. And even that the last time he mentions the hump, Marty Feldman looks at the camera and kind of gives us that little wink, like he's messing with him. Like, this is not a real hump. He's moving it left and right. And it's perfectly done. And then after that, it's dropped.
Right. It's never talked about again, It's one of the best examples of what we're talking about. Kenya had mentioned the usage of the different characters and how that seems just perfect. That's a testament to Mel Brooks, in my opinion.
He's at the height of his game in 74 with these two movies. Top tier.
Well, I think here, and he even says, this is what actually looks like a movie. You know, technical wise, he says, this is the best way to make a movie that he's ever done. I agree with him because I feel like this can pass, even though there's comedy in it and it's a satire, it can pass for a late sequel to the Frankenstein movies because of how it looks and how it's shot. You guys talking about how much you appreciate it being black and white and how the studio wanted to be in color. In fact, they were going to give him a black and white type of film, but it was kind of had a tint to it, which had some color to it. So it'd be easier to switch over to color if need be. And I guess one of the guys who worked on the project with Mel said, no, you want to use this type of black and white film. Kind of like similar to what they had used back in the 1930s. Not the black and white stuff that they were using in the 60s, because that actually had some color to it. And Mel wanted this to be as close to Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein movies that could possibly be. I think it's more like the Bride of Frankenstein than it is Frankenstein. I watched both of those movies to be prepared for this movie. And not a lot is grabbed actually from those two movies except for the girl character, and that's completely different. And the hermit.
He doesn't kill her.
In Frankenstein, he meets her, they do the flower thing, and then he tosses her in the water and she drowns. So, and then in Bride of Frankenstein, of course, the hermit story, which I think that, for me, one of the highlights in the film is Gene Hackman playing the hermit in Young Frankenstein. Gene Hackman got the part because him and Gene Wilder became friends on Bonnie and Clyde. They would play tennis with each other, and they were in a conversation about what their next film was, and Gene Wilder mentioned Young Frankenstein. He goes, comedy? Is there a part for me? And they try to think of something for him, and they finally said The Hermit. So he's got the French Connection, he's got the Poseidon Adventure.
The Conversation in 74, too.
Okay, so right now he's known as a serious
Very serious actor.
And so he kind of wants to do this. And I think he hits it out of the park. I think his performance as the Hermit is hilarious. I mean, yes, is it silly humor? Of course it is. Do we all know that soup is going to lay on the lamp? Sure we are. Do we know that, he's going to light him on fire? Because we know the monster is scared of fire. So we know all these things are going to happen.
We know he can't drink the wine, the little
all these
things.
We know that are going to happen. But it's the way that Gene Hackman and Peter Boyle Boyle's reactions to it make it work. Because without their two performances and how they make it work, it could fall just flat. It could be just be like, okay, that's a silly, that's used so many times. Granted, it is 74 and maybe it's not used as much. But I feel like even by this time, this is an old running gag. And I just think they pull it off because of how wonderful they portray their character.
I will admit, the first time I saw the movie with the Gene Hackman skit in it, I did not like it. But it has really recently grown on me where I really appreciate it now as being an integral part of the movie.
Yeah, I mean, Peter Boyle, his reactions to everything that's going on there. Peter Boyle does so much, even though he has this mask on his face, he still is expressive enough that you see the panic when he's moving the bowl back and forth. He wants it so bad.
The monster just appreciates as someone is looking, as someone can't see him, Hermit or whatever his character is, just sees him as a person, not a monster. So the monster is really just appreciating. Yeah, I know. Just appreciating the hospitality that he is receiving from him, and then just loses it.
But even earlier,
the panic on his face as he knows he's not going to get the soup in the bowl. It's
right.
It's really.
He rolls his eyes.
Really,
he's like, yeah. Even earlier though, Peter Boyle does a great job with facial expressions. I think about when Gene Wilder is trapped in the room with the monster.
I love that scene.
And he wants to get out. He tells him not to let him out, but he starts screaming, "Let me out! Let me out!" I was just kidding. And then he realizes, he goes, "Hey, you're a good-looking guy." And then he starts telling him all these great things about him. And the facial reactions by Peter Boyle, he stands like he's like something special. He looks like to the side.
Like a Greek Adonis.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The way he shows facial expressions and movements is just great. And then in that scene when Gene Wilder becomes a Jewish mom, this is a good boy.
Good boy.
just a good boy. I love that scene. And of course, that's the scene where he gives up and says that he's finally, a Frankenstein. But Peter Boyle, I enjoy that scene. Even before that, he's on the table and he gets ready to get off and he's going to walk and he looks down and he's like, I don't want to do it. I'm kind of scared here. Somebody said that they felt like this was the best performance of a Frankenstein monster in the history of all the monsters. And I can't disagree with this because as much as I like Boris Karloff as the Frankenstein monster, he doesn't do as much than just kind of walk around. There's a smile that he has with the girl before he tosses her in. But outside of that, really, he doesn't have those facial expressions. Fun fact, by the way, Boris Karloff's daughter says that Young Frankenstein is her favorite movie of all time. So
interesting.
That's an interesting fact there. When I don't like Peter Boyle is at the end when he can talk.
Oh, I like that.
I know it's needed. And I understand the joke, but I think...
You don't like the smart, intellectual monster?
Not as much. I like his reaction, though, when he kind of grunts and shakes his head at Madeline Kahn when Madeline Kahn comes in with...
He's reading the Wall Street Journal and the glasses. Yes.
And she's just doing this little dance, and she's like she's taking her finger and sizzling it on her butt.
I love it. I love her in that
he just
scene.
goes, and he shakes his head. I like that, but the intellectual, it's all right.
Oh, no, I dig it. I dig Peter Boyle here. He is awesome. I was on this movie that he met his wife, who was a writer for Rolling Stone. That's how he met John Lennon. He and John Lennon became really good friends up until John's death. Yeah, it's pretty interesting that this led to that. That's pretty cool. But yeah, Peter Boyle he's expressive, and that I can understand what Ken's saying about it being the best Frankenstein, because Boris Karloff, even though he's the man of 1,000 faces, not all of them are always very expressive. He does a lot of work with his eyes and stuff of that nature that really set him apart from other Frankensteins. Or not Frankenstein's monster.
It's kind of amazing that we've actually reviewed a number of Peter Boyle's films. We did the Candidate earlier, and We did Taxi Driver, so
Yeah.
we've reviewed him a few times already. I wouldn't have thought of him as a big-time movie star. I think about him as the dad in Everybody Loves Raymond.
So look at the breadth of his work there. Taxi Driver, The Candidate, and Young Frankenstein. 3 movies that couldn't be more different from each other if they tried. That's a testament to your work as an actor at that point, I would imagine.
And we always said that an actor who can act with his face, that takes a lot of talent. Anybody can say a line. It takes a lot more to really express what you mean through just facial expressions. And I think that's why people love this movie and love the monster here. So we feel sorry for him because he didn't ask for this. He doesn't mean to be this way. But at the same time, we don't see the hurt. We don't see the different facial expressions like we've been saying. And I think that's why we like Peter Boyle here, is because he gives us all that. Not just the comedy. He gives us that frustration of, maybe I don't want to be a monster. I don't want to be this person. It's an all-around great performance.
You feel bad for him when he's chained up in the prison.
Right.
And they've got all the chains. You really feel bad for him.
He ripped those things off pretty fast, didn't he?
Yeah.
Almost like he was taunting the guy.
At least I felt bad for him. He brings a lifelike presence to the monster.
He does a great job of reacting to the fire. In fact, one of my favorite scenes still is the scene where he first tries to choke Gene Wilder, and Gene Wilder has to do
Charades
with a sedative, or sedative.
Sedative! Yes.
And even though that is kind of another cheesy kind of scene here, it works perfectly. You just can't help but laugh at that scene. And then afterwards, they both sit down.
I was just going to say, that's my favorite part.
The Abby someone.
That's probably my favorite part of the whole movie.
Yes.
They're back and forth. You're not going to be mad at me? No.
Yes, I will not
I promise.
be mad. Yes. Yeah.
Abby something?
Abby Normal.
Abby Normal.
I think that was the name.
Are
Abby Normal.
you saying?
Yes.
We talked about it earlier, but Gene Wilder and Marty Feldman work perfectly back and forth together, whether it be in a comic way or even in a serious way. When they're doing the doctor and the mad scientist assistant, they work perfectly. And then when it feels like it's getting too serious, they do something silly, like all of a sudden Igor is outside and then all of a sudden he's standing next to him.
Yes.
And he just wonders how that happens. They know how to break the seriousness with a joke. And then the same way with the jokes. They're funny, and then they know when to switch it over to being serious for a little bit to give us a little time to get ready for the next joke. I just think
comic relief.
Perfectly paced.
Yes.
We talked a little bit, too, about the atmosphere and its connection to the past. It's pretty amazing that they were able to get all of the old props from the first Frankenstein movie and the Universal movie. And I guess the guy that was in the guy's garage, he had never gotten any credit for the work that he did on the Frankenstein movie. It's kind of crazy to think about. But Mel Brooks was able to track this guy down and got all of the old props from the first Frankenstein movie. And then he gave him credit. And that adds an element of authenticity to the movie as well, like what we were talking about, like the black and white and everything. So I guess one of the questions that I want to pose to the group is, Mel Brooks is known for being a spoof person. And you look at Spaceballs, Robin Hood Men in Tights,
Blazing
movies
Saddles.
like that. Blazing Saddles, in a way, yes. Definitely are spoofs of particular type of movie or movie in general.
High anxiety.
High anxiety as well. Is this a spoof, or is this more of an homage?
I would say this is more of an homage with spoof tendencies, but I think he's really paying more of an homage to the past Frankenstein movies with a little bit of a comic element.
Yeah, I think it's like a hybrid. I know they talk about it being a satire. I think that's a better word than spoof. Just because it doesn't spoof a lot of things from the original Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein. Like I said earlier, it uses the hermit, it uses the girl. But outside of that, it's kind of its own thing. And I think that's where you go back to the homage thing. So I think it's kind of a hybrid of all those type of things, which is why it's so unique. This movie's almost 50 years old, and we haven't seen really another movie like this again. And that's a testament to Mel Brooks.
this is an homage. Where when we talked about Blazing Saddles, in my opinion, you can go draw a direct connection from Blazing Saddles directly to Airplane and movies of that nature, where it is a direct type of a spoof type of a thing, especially with the humor. Whereas this is, like Eric said it, I think perfectly, it plays true to the original, and it still has that thematic element of the deeper issues of life and death, and then coming back to life and the creation of life. Those elements still remain in this movie. It's kind of odd for a comedy, but it still tackles them on a deeper level. And I think that that's why this is an homage, even though there are some funny elements to it. I think that's part of the brilliance of Gene Wilder, because while Gene Wilder is funny in this movie, he plays in a pretty amazing Dr. Frankenstein. If we really get down to the base of everything, he plays an amazing role here. I think he doesn't get the credit that he really deserves as far as this movie. I think he could have been nominated for an Academy Award for this particular role.
Very easily.
That's how good I think he is, because he's good on so many different levels here. And I think his portrayal of Dr. Frankenstein, I think, is what makes this an homage. He does the line from the heavens and everything just as the lightning's about to strike. That is an amazing acting performance. And then to top it off, to have the comedic chops to be able to do the funny stuff, it's next level.
When I think about the two performances, one from the original 1931 Frankenstein and this performance here, I think about how they both look at the situation. Dr. Frankenstein in 1931 says he knows what it's like to be a god. His "it's alive, it's alive." We actually see Wilder. He doesn't say "it's alive," he says "alive, alive, it's alive." It's different, but it's the same. And then he also has this other line where Inga says something that he looks hideous, and he says he looks beautiful, and he's mine. And it's different from the lines from Dr. Frankenstein in the original, but it's the same. It's the same attitude of the doctor. And I think that's what Gene Wilder gets here, is the attitude of Dr. Frankenstein. Once he becomes obsessed and becomes Frankenstein, Dr. Frankenstein, not Frankenstein, he embraces that role. He embraces, the 1931 character, and he does a great job of it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. As much as I like him in almost everything that he does, I think this is probably his best role. This shows just how amazing of an actor he really is.
This is the top of the mountain. We see producers. I mean, we actually could go back to Bonnie and Clyde, because Bonnie and Clyde, he is great in that scene where he's, being kidnapped. He's excellent. But then we see him in the producers, getting more seasoned. He's starting to become a little bit more aware of his gifts. And then when we get to Willy Wonka, he's got it. He's figured it out. He knows how to play a Gene Wilder role. And he knows his strength, and he knows what he can do. And then we get Blazing Saddles. And then I think here we are at Young Frankenstein, and we're at the top. Not saying that the other performances he has later are bad. They're not. In fact, one of my favorite movies of all time is Silver Streak. I think he does a great job in that.
That's the movie I was thinking about.
And I think that's one of those movies down the road that I really want to look at. And maybe we'll do that as a Wilder, Richard Pryor type of set, figure that out down the road. But I do agree. I think this is the movie that he's on top. I mean, he didn't direct this movie, but he helped write it. His performance, along with Marty Feldman, those two performances really are the heart and soul of this movie. And I think maybe Peter Boyle's character is kind of like the spirit. Or you could intertwine all three of those. But those three guys right there, and not saying nothing against the ladies because they do a great job, but there's something about these three. I just don't think you could replace any one of those three characters or any one of those three actors in this role, especially Marty Feldman, I think, because of the uniqueness of how this will look and his comic timing on top of that. He's just the perfect Igor type of character. So we reviewed 3 movies of Mel Brooks and Gene Wilder and their relationship. This is the last movie they ever did together. In fact, in this movie, the only argument that they ever had from what Gene Wilder and Mel Brooks have said was the putting on the Ritz scene. Mel Brooks didn't want this. He did not want this scene at all, and Gene Wilder fought tooth and nail. Mel Brooks says the reason why he gave it to him was because of how passionate Gene Wilder was in wanting that scene. The scene plays out great. It's more of a King Kong type of scene. It reminds me of when they capture King Kong and they put him on stage and then he breaks free. It's very much like that. Putting on the roots. I don't know how long it took him to get the monster to learn how to tap dance and do a little dance number there, but it's a comedy, so who cares, right?
So they never did another movie together. Was it because of that, or just didn't work out?
I think Gene Wilder really wanted to start being more of a director. He goes on and he does a couple of directorial type of movies. They're not as good as Mel Brooks. Sherlock Holmes' Smarter Brother is in the vein of Mel Brooks. It misses a lot of marks. It's definitely not as bad as Holmes and Watson from Will Ferrell and
John C. Reilly.
John C. Reilly, that's pretty horrible. When it's Young Frankenstein, it's Mel Brooks' Young Frankenstein. It's not Mel Brooks and Gene Wilder's Frankenstein. It's always Mel Brooks' Young Frankenstein. And I think he needed to get out of Mel Brooks' shadow.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Because they were still friends.
Yeah.
At least from, listening to interviews with Gene Wilder and Mel Brooks, they still thought really highly of each other, and they were still friends that talked, but they never again worked on a project together.
When you've done 3 movies, like the 3 movies that we've talked about, that have been so iconic, I mean, the producers really found a second life when the musical came out. It found a whole new audience and was reimagined. I think when you've done 3 movies like that, it's, especially with the ending here with Young Frankenstein, I don't know how you could top this. And I think there's that feeling as well that where can we go together from here? In my opinion, it would be looked at as this is good, but it's not as good as Young Frankenstein. And so then the arrows start to come for the relationship.
I think also Gene Wilder might have had a different career path. After we see, like I said, Sherlock Holmes' Smarter Brother, and he did The World's Greatest Lover. Once Gene Wilder did things like Silver Streak and stuff, Stir Crazy and all those type of movies, they were a different type of movie. Whereas Mel Brooks kind of stayed in that same comedic vein with like High Anxiety, History of the World Part 1, which we're going to get a History of the World Part 2 in the month of March. I'm not sure how good that's going to be, but I'm still going to watch it regardless.
Cautiously optimistic.
Cautious on that one. But then we see Mel Brooks trying to be serious with Life Stinks, and it stunk.
Yeah.
So Mel Brooks needs to stay in what he does best, and that's comedies.
One of the things I did read, you brought up that Gene wanted to be a director. And I guess one of the things that occurred on set a lot here with Young Frankenstein was, I guess Mel Brooks knew this. When he was giving direction to Gene and stuff, he was explaining things. Because I don't think Gene ever told him that he wanted to be a director, but I think Mel Brooks realized what he wanted to do. When giving directions, he would explain things to Gene Wilder. And I guess Gene asked him one day why he was explaining stuff. He goes, I'm doing all of this so you can be a better director than me. Ultimately, that never really happened. So yeah, I mean, the two of them knew each other really well. I think that it's hard because comedic actors don't want to necessarily be typecast. And I think if Gene would have done another Mel Brooks movie, all of a sudden he's going to be pigeonholed.
That's not always necessarily a bad thing, because we see like Martin Scorsese and
Robert De Niro.
Well, Robert De Niro and
Harvey Keitel.
Right now with Leonardo DiCaprio. So having a certain director kind of be your muse is not necessarily a bad thing.
It's not.
Them together work magic. Them apart are still good. It's kind of like the Beatles in a certain way. You got that Lennon McCartney thing going. With them together, there's magic. With them separate, it still can be beautiful, but Mel Brooks nor Gene Wilder ever have a movie like Young Frankenstein or Blazing Saddles ever again.
Nope. And I love Spaceballs, but it's not this.
No.
It's probably the closest, though, of all the Mel Brooks movies. High Anxiety, I think, is right up there. I love High Anxiety. But I think Spaceballs is one of those generational movies that everyone knows Spaceballs.
Yeah, I mean,
not everyone knows High Anxiety.
If you like Star Wars, you like Spaceballs.
That's the whole thing. It's playing on that. And
we're supposed to get another Spaceballs movie, too. But I don't know.
Well, Spaceballs was our introduction to Mel Brooks. Let's be honest. When we were kids.
86, absolutely.
Yeah, Spaceballs is probably the first time we see a Mel Brooks movie. Maybe for me, it was History of the World Part 1.
Mine was Spaceballs.
You are about 65, so...
Yeah.
Well, I'm classic. What can I say?
How many assholes are on this ship?
Are we ever going to get Shoes in Outer Space?
Well, that's going to be History of the World Part 2. We'll see if that comes out. So, I know we didn't mention it, and I know we're getting close to our reviews here, but anybody want to talk about the rape scene?
And no, because it's not a rape scene. I've watched it 3 times. It's not a rape scene.
It's not even kidnaps close. A woman from her bedroom, takes her back to a barn, and then has sex with her right away. That's not a rape scene.
She was very willing.
Consensual.
Once she said wolf,
She was against it until she saw the equipment that was being utilized, and then she was very much into it.
I agreed with Eric that this could be a family show until we got to this scene, and then the monsters grunting. And it's like, okay, this stopped being a family movie now.
You could possibly get away with it.
No, they did. It's not a rape scene. I agree with you guys.
It's one of those, it's a subtle innuendo kind of, it's kind of like Shrek and Toy Story. You got your adult humor that the adults get, and you get, the younger kid who doesn't even know what the hell's going on. They don't get
exactly.
It's done well.
I agree 100%.
They don't get it, but they're kind of wondering what is going on. I mean, I guess as a kid you could say, he might be killing her.
If you ask your parents, they'll come up with something creative to tell you what's
this
going
generation
on,
might just tell them they're having sex. So.
Yeah.
But no, it's not rapey. We've done other things that are rapey, but this is not rapey.
Like what?
Yeah. Then we had that discussion in that Robert Redford movie.
Yeah, we've had this discussion like 2 or 3 times.
Which
about what's a rapey.
The Condor movie.
Yeah, the 3 Days of the Condor, we had a lengthy discussion on whether that was rapey or not. That was rapey.
The music itself to that rapey. Movie was rapey.
They did the whole bump chicka bump behind the thing. It was a little weird.
Yeah, I guess when you handcuff a woman and then bring her to bed, I guess that could be a little rapey.
I mean,
it's a gray area. Yeah. Okay. Dun dun dun.
I'll take the rapist for 100.
Yeah.
All right, let's wrap it up.
Well, let's talk about our reviews of the movie. We've had some great banter here, and I think we've really made some good points about this movie and talked about some great scenes on it, and I'm very curious to hear what your reviews are. So let's start off with Ted.
This is my favorite Mel Brooks movie. This is also my favorite Gene Wilder movie. I think it's the perfect marriage here. I think that neither one are nearly as funny as they are here. I think together they produce something that's magical. I love the nostalgic feel of the Universal horror movies. And I like what Ken had to say because I agree 100% that this could be a sequel to the Frankenstein movies. I really think it fits right into that vein.
I never really thought about that until you guys brought it up.
It fits so well. I mean, it doesn't necessarily fit into the Hammer movies, but the Hammer movies were supposed to be different. This is a true Universal horror movie. I love the homage to it. I love the fact that they use the original props from the first movie. I love the homage that Madeline Kahn does to The Bride of Frankenstein. That all hits massive home runs for me. And then the addition with Marty Feldman and Peter Boyle, they're so good here. There's not one person that's bad in this movie that is like, man, I wish they would have recast that, or I wish they would have cut this character out. There's none of that. Everybody plays the exact right role, and I think that when we discussed that, that's the brilliance of this and Blazing Saddles. Nothing is overdone. It's all done just right, and you get the characters in just the right amount of doses. Like Mars's character, the inspector. If he's in there more, all of a sudden that voice becomes annoying, and then it takes away, but it's in there just the right amount. The movie just plays well, and like Blazing Saddles 2, this movie is a tight 1 hour and 40 minutes. It's perfectly paced. It's the exact right length. It doesn't need to be any more. I don't need anything more. And this is an A+ for me. Over the years, here again, I know you guys joked about my top 25 movies, but this is another movie that falls right into that vein, where this is essential. And I'll watch this movie 2 or 3 times a year. Considering the amount of movies that I watch, that's saying a lot, because I do watch a lot of movies. But this one always comes there, and it's just one of the best movies that I can see.
Cool. A+. That's a high mark. Very hard for me to disagree with anything you've said. You've pretty much just summed it up for me. The only thing that's different for me is I think there's a few scenes that I don't know. I don't know if they're really needed. A few little nickel and dime things. But literally, it's splitting hairs. It really is. This is definitely one of my favorite comedies of all time. It's clearly my favorite Gene Wilder movie of all time. But the one difference difference is I prefer Blazing Saddles over to this movie. Very tight, though. Blazing Saddles wins by a nose, if you will, if we're going horse racing, but it's really close. This one falls right in the category of an A-. And it could be a borderline A, but it is right there. There is nothing that I can say bad about this movie. It's definitely a top-tier movie by Mel Brooks. It is Gene Wilder's best movie. The supporting cast in this and the names that are in this movie, they just work together so well. I think it was you, Ken, that said, you've got each one of these characters is playing the comedian, the straight person. They rotate around so perfectly that it flows. And I can't think of any other characters to play these roles. It's cast beautifully. And I'm like you. I watch this movie a couple times a year too. A- for me. Ken, take us home.
This movie, for me, is the best Gene Wilder, Mel Brooks movie by either one of them. I like this more than I like Blazing Saddles. When I talked about Blazing Saddles in our last episode, I talked about how Blazing Saddles kind of slowly went down on my list. Blazing Saddles was an A at one time and has slid down to an A- throughout the years, where this has slid up. This movie, as the years have gone by, has gotten more and more important to me. I don't give A-pluses very often. I try to save that for, I say, my top 2 movies, but I'm willing to go maybe my top 5 movies of all time. And this just kind of misses the top 5. And it's hard for me to point any reason why. It's just probably those other movies that are ahead of it are just on another level for me. But there's nothing wrong with this movie whatsoever. There's not a misstep. I do have a preference of the monster not really speaking at the end, but it doesn't hurt the movie in any type of way, and it doesn't change my grade any. Performances are perfect. There's nobody I would put in place of these actors and actresses that are in this movie. From top to bottom, this movie is perfectly cast. A couple of things I wanted to throw out there really quick before I gave my final grade. I did, find out that Marty Feldman actually with the hump was moving it on purpose throughout the movie, and then they finally decided to add it in as a gag. So he was playing with everybody else throughout the movie, and that was what Marty Feldman did. Marty Feldman was the comic relief for everybody throughout the whole movie. There was just something about him that was just pure funny. And Gene Wilder is funny, but Gene Wilder also has this serious side that we see that makes him the perfect Dr. Frankenstein in this movie. And we already said how we feel like Peter Boyle might be the best monster to ever play in the Frankenstein type of movies. This movie for me is an A, and I think it's a great way to kind of end this collaboration between Brooks and Wilder. Yeah, would have loved to see them get together later on? Sure. But like I said earlier about Lennon McCartney and the Beatles and stuff like this is kind of like their Abbey Road. This is kind of the great way to say goodbye as a tandem together. And they work with others throughout their careers. Gene Wilder works again with Madeline Kahn and Marty Feldman. And Mel Brooks also again works with Madeline Kahn and Cloris Leachman. These people don't stop working with each other. I adore this movie. I'm happy we got to do it. I enjoyed watching it. It is a movie that I even put in my Blu-ray player once or twice a year myself. I've even had a Halloween party one year, and this was one of the movies that we ended up watching. That's how important this movie is to me. So again, this movie is an A.
Cool. All right. Well, I agree. I think it's a great high note to end their collaboration together on such a phenomenal movie that I can't think of anyone who does not like this movie. Even people that don't like movies like this movie. So, all right. Well, we are going to be continuing our Hooked on Movies podcast going into March Madness. For all of our NCAA fans, we're going to kick it off with some basketball movies. And Ken, what is the first movie we are going to be looking at?
So the first movie we're going to be looking at is a 1970 basketball movie called One-on-One, starring Robbie Benson. So many of you may have never seen this, so you might want to go out and check your local library or see if it's, on Amazon Prime or somewhere where you can maybe rent it. For me, it's a decent watch, so please, if you get a chance to watch it before our podcast, do so.
Ted, you've never seen it?
I have never seen this movie.
I've never seen it, and never heard of it.
Never even knew it existed.
So this is going to be our virgin eyes and ears watching this movie together. So
I didn't even know who Robbie Benson was.
no one else does either. So we are excited to watch this movie and give our review. And hopefully you can find a copy of it, and we'll continue with some of our other March Madness movies after this.
Just listen to us, and
Or just listen
we'll
to
tell
us.
you whether or not it's worth watching.
Sure, why not?
I had to convince these two that this movie could be part of this trilogy of basketball movies because we're also doing Hoosiers and Blue Chip. I had told them that Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert loved this movie, so they said, okay, if those two liked it, then we'll give it a shot.
Why
Yeah,
not?
That's true.
Ted, where can they find us out there on the World Wide Web?
We can be found on Twitter at hookedon_movies. And then you can find us on whatever podcast platform you're listening to us on, whether it be Apple, Spotify, Good Pods, Anchor. And if you can, leave us a 5-star review. It helps us get noticed and get seen. And it'll also help us, hopefully, to get to our goal of becoming a Rotten Tomatoes critics. I think that would be a really cool way for our podcast.
I would really like to be part of the Rotten Tomatoes family. That
I
would
could
be
throw
cool.
some Rotten Tomatoes at you right
Well, I
now,
know
if
you
like.
can, right? Sure. And Ken, some of the articles you've let us review on Facebook have been really good. I've enjoyed those.
Yes, I appreciate people responding to our articles on our Facebook page, whether it be like, should Top Gun be a Oscar-nominated movie? No. Feel free to get in the conversation. And also, don't forget to check out the Dorkening Network. There's a bunch of other podcasts that are on this network that if you know what, if you're not into movies and you want to check out something else, there's just so much to choose from on that site. And you could just go ahead and type in the Dorkening Network on your browser, and it will bring that website up, and you can see all the episodes that are out. So check it out.
All right. Well, that is all the time we have for this episode. And as always, I'm not wearing any pants. Film at 11.
See you at the movies.
See you next time on Hooked on Movies.